Okay. Um, Today, Bill Muth and I are going to talk a little bit about the new Journal of Prison Education and Reentry. This is an online journal. It's for scholars doing research in the field of correctional education and also practitioners doing work in correctional fields. And the presentation that we're going to do today is focused on practitioners. So our goal is we really want to maybe speak to people who are working in the classrooms, in prisons and jails and correctional settings, and maybe talk about what those practitioners could bring to our journal, because that's a really vital part of what we're trying to do with the Journal of Prison Education and Reentry. So I'm going to have Bill Muth go ahead and begin by kind of telling us about how the journal got started. So.
Okay. Thanks, Ginger, and
Sure.
Eric, thank you for this chance to promote our new journal, which we're just a little bit excited about, and welcome everybody. I would like to extend the sort of the scope from, like Ginger was talking about, folks working in the prisons and in the classrooms, but also like we are interested in a very wide range of practitioners and researchers, of course, and so if you are working in a community center with individuals who are coming out of prison, or who are cycling through a jail, or youth in cycling through in an alternative setting, really any kind of alternative setting context could possibly relate to sort of the range that we're looking for. After all, we're also talking about reentry. So many folks, when they come out of prison, if they're fortunate enough, come back to centers like adult literacy centers, or if they're extremely lucky, into community colleges, or to other campuses or vocational training. So if you are in the community working, but you do have some students who are occasionally coming through the prison systems, please, consider ways that you can share your experience as well. So a little bit about the sort of the concept of the journal. We really wanted it from the start to be both an outlet for researchers and practitioners, and often we're both, right? It's not like you're necessarily one or the other. You could be a classroom teacher doing action research and do a research paper, or you could be, an academic type who also works on the ground and wants to write as a practitioner. But there are two basic streams to the journal, and one has a blind review process. The Ginger, I think, will explain a little bit about that, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just cover it now. The academics scholarship side is a regular blind review, peer review, blinded, and the requirements are fairly standard for a rigorous academic journal. On the practitioner side, it is not a blinded review, but of course it is reviewed by our practitioner editor, and but it doesn't go through sort of the blinded process, nor does it have the same kinds of requirements in terms of APA conventions for references and citations, although they're quite often used in practitioner papers. The genres on the practitioner side are more diverse, and in some ways it's really an exciting opportunity to see how we can push the envelope a little bit in terms of the writing that goes on. You'll see, I think, when Ginger walks us through the journal, that we have, for example, a practitioner paper from Bass Dressinger from John Jay College, who is writing as sharing kind of in a journal format her experiences working in prison. So the practitioner side, which is our focus today, is really kind of more open in terms of possibilities. Another paper has a link to a video that the author did. So, but what we're really interested in with this journal in the big picture is the conversation between researchers and practitioners. I know there's something Eric's near and dear to his heart is how to get digital conversations going through wikis and through other media. So I don't really know, I may be pushing the term conversation a bit, but nevertheless, we want this to be a home where the two streams are informing each other. And so this is the quote that Ginger put up is from a book that I'm sure many of you are aware of called Reading Work, Literacies in the New Workplace by Mary Ellen Belfiore, Tracy Defoe, Sue Follansbee, Judy Hunter, and Nancy Jackson. And our idea for the journal didn't exactly come from this book, but nevertheless it was there's a chapter in the back of their book. They were anthropologists doing workplace literacy in places like pickle factories in Canada and urban hotels in Toronto, places like that. They really pushed this idea of how there's such a need for space for practitioners, whether they're managers or they're union organizers or they're workers or teachers or counselors or correctional officers or whatever they might be. There's such a need for practitioners to be able to share their perspective and also to share and to collaborate with researchers. So we're picking up on that spirit, and we really want the journal to do that. The other, thank you, Ginger. The other collaboration is, in addition to researchers collaborating with practitioners, we feel, especially in corrections in the United States, a huge need to collaborate with other countries, because it's no secret that we don't quite have it right yet in the United States. In fact, we've got as about wrong as we can possibly get it. So we need these collaborations from other parts of the world, and so we're hoping this journal will do that, and we think we're off to a pretty good start. Okay, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. There are colleagues at the university, or at Cal State University in San Bernardino, who have been talking for probably a decade or more, or probably more than that, probably 12 or 14 years, with colleagues from the European Prison Education Association. And that's a conference that is a lot like, if any of you ever go to the CEA, the Correctional Education Association in the United States, it's a practitioner-oriented conference that is open to all members of the European Union, but also to folks from around the world. And so it has some great collaborations and the conversations with some of the representatives from the EPEA and California started many years ago, and in the last few years we've been able to sort of realize that with a lot of help from the University of Bergen in Norway, and then our home here at Virginia Commonwealth University. So, and then Ginger, if you want to do one more slide and then I'll stop talking. At one of the EPEA conferences, I think it was in Manchester, England, we did a survey of the practitioners and asked them what they wanted in a journal. And so this is from the practitioner's perspective. And these were some of the kinds of, these were sort of themes that came out. Where I am in my prison, no one has a clue what I'm doing. It'd be really nice to be able to sort of share and vent and just articulate with somebody else who would get it. There's a big emphasis on the arts in parts of Europe, Ireland, and Ireland in particular, in England. And so that's another sort of kind of weird cross-discipline that doesn't have a necessary home and looking for a home. People that want to be connected to the research space thought this would be a great place to do that. Professional identity was a big deal for some people and didn't seem to make a difference with others. There was a need or an interest in opening this up as wide as possible, and we think we've got a pretty wide net. But one thing that I'll say is this is not a journal for like, it's not a creative writing journal, so it's not a journal where prisoners would have an outlet to do sort of to write poetry and things like that. However, if you are a prisoner and you are teaching or co-teaching or tutoring and you're wearing a practitioner's hat, by all means, that's an incredible voice that we want to hear. So doesn't mean we won't keep evolving, but right now that's sort of, we had to draw the line somewhere, and that's where we drew the line. Okay, and if there's no questions, I guess I'll turn it back to Ginger, but if there are questions, they're always welcome. So.
Yeah, let's give people a chance. Is there any questions? Or hang on, Ginger. Is there questions or thoughts that people had of kind of Bill setting the stage for the journal and kind of the directions that, or the perspectives that people are coming from? So far, so good?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, awesome. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the website for the journal and the journal itself. And then I'd like to actually show you guys the journal because we published yesterday, which yesterday, October 13th, was the International Day of Prison Education. So that's the day that we decided to release the journal. We've got the website right up here. So if you want to jot it down, and I'll take you to that site in a moment. It's a fully online, open access journal. You'll see when I bring it up that we produce the journal as a PDF. So if you really want to have a paper copy, you can print it out. But it's fully online. We do have the peer-reviewed research section. So if you are a researcher and you submit your work to that stream, it will go through a peer review panel. We are anticipating a twice yearly publication. One thing that I really want to emphasize is that we have no fees or costs of any kind. So this is a totally open access journal. There's no article processing fee. We're never going to charge for access. It's something that's open to everybody. So as long as you have internet access, you can get to the journal. You can read the journal and see what the authors have to offer. Okay, so if you guys don't mind, I'll just actually bring up the website and the journal itself so that you can see it. So let me see. When you go to our site, this is what you'll see. You'll see our journal. We're very proud of it. We have announcements, and then you can just scroll down, and you'll see the cover of the journal and the table of contents. So you just click on the table of contents, and you have the option to download the entire issue as a PDF, or you can just select specific papers to read in PDF form, or you can just bring up an HTML form right on your screen. So we've got some of the practitioner papers down here, and I think I'll just bring up a couple of these so that you guys can see some of the practitioner selections that we have for this first issue. So I'll bring up McColl's Fluorescent Glow. So McColl's a writer out of VCU here in Richmond, and she submitted a piece that was a narrative, and she says it describes aspects of my semester teaching English as a second language in the city jail. I'd expected to be able to draw grand conclusions about incarceration, inmates, and policy, but instead I discovered that the inmates sitting in front of me were, above all else, simply students. The article also includes a digital story about the experience, so it's down at the bottom. The narrative is intended for those with interest in jail or prison education. So in this piece, McColl, she talks about her expectations for going into the jail classroom and how those expectations were challenged by reality. And I think it's a really good example of what we can do with the practitioner section.
And may I jump in?
Sure, go ahead.
Just one really quick note. If you look at McColl's paper, they can be quite brief. I think, are we saying
Yeah, it's short.
2,500 words or something? Is that what
Hmm.
we're? So, and I know Ginger will come back to that, but just they don't have to be like elaborate. They can be very succinct, or they can just be one vignette about your experience. And you'll see that if you go through some of the other articles too.
Yeah. We also have uh, Dr. Dreisinger's paper, which Dr. Muth mentioned, and this is definitely longer. But if you scroll through it, you'll see that it's written from the first person point of view, and she includes not only her journal entries, but also journal entries of the students that she was working with, and they are also listed as authors on this paper. So this is another great perspective. Um, Another example that I wanted to bring up here is Seth Croft's paper. He was working in a writing workshop at the Richmond City Jail, and he wanted to write about this particular environment that was created in the classroom at the Richmond City Jail that we refer to as the sanctuary. I also volunteered at the Richmond City Jail classroom, so I've been there and I've seen it, and it is like a sanctuary. So Seth Croft wrote this with 3 students in the jail program. They were able to work on this together, and his abstract says the following article is a collaboration among 4 individuals about unique programs run through the sanctuary at the Richmond City Jail in Virginia, USA. The Richmond City Jail is one of the few jails in the U.S. to offer programs to inmates who serve only short sentences as compared to prisons where the incarcerated serve much longer. In addition to this anomaly, students from outside of the jail come inside to take college classes with the inmates. The programs include literature classes, yoga, religious studies, creative writing, and more. The article explores the impact of the sanctuary on the spirit, confidence, and perceptions of self-worth among inmates as compared to incarceration without such programs. Practitioners may use the programs detailed as a model for other institutions and evidence of the success of community building and education inside jails and prisons. So when if you go through and you read this piece, which I recommend, it's written from the perspective of all 4 of them. So they jointly kind of describe what they experience as both inside and outside of the jail. Okay, let me see. Well, I also want to go ahead and show you guys the PDF version of the issue, if you don't mind, because we're very proud of it. So I downloaded it onto my desktop and bring it up here, and you can do this too. So you too can have this excitement. So we have our beautiful cover. We're very proud of it. It's painting by a prisoner in Ireland, and then you'll see as you scroll through it that we've got everything laid out just as you would see in a traditional print journal. Dr. Muth, did you want to add something?
No, just that you might get the impression from the first issue that the practitioner papers are all from the United States. That would be because they are. However, it's just kind of quirky. We're just sort of getting started. I think I think now there's a couple papers that are coming in from Uzbekistan, if I'm not mistaken, and I really think that the power and the strength of the practitioner side will be some of the things you might read and that are in those initial papers, as fine as they are, you might say, well, that's kind of familiar, I kind of get that. But I think reading about practitioners' experiences from diverse other countries is really going to make it even more powerful. And so, yeah, that's all I want to say about that.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do now, and Dr. Jacobson, maybe you can tell me if this is possible or not. What Dr. Muth and I had intended to do is kind of do a brainstorming workshop, see if we can generate some ideas with the participants of this webinar. But I'd like to ask what would be more beneficial for the participants, doing a brainstorm to possibly produce material that could be submitted, and then talk through it. I don't know how much collaboration or how many opportunities, if the people listening have a chance to speak and kind of talk about their ideas, or if the participants would rather kind of look at how to set up a profile on the journal site, or would they rather just move right into looking at some of the guidelines for submission?
I mean,
So I guess my question is, for the participants, what's going to be most beneficial for them?
Yeah, I think there is the possibility to kind of brainstorm. So one way to do that is to use that question section area, so that if people had
Okay.
ideas for kind of topics that they would like either to write about or read about, issues or themes that you think are really pressing or really productive to think about when it comes to prison education and reentry. So, maybe for a few minutes you can type in some of those ideas in the question area and I can share them, or you could raise your hand and I could unmute you, and then you could speak directly. So either way, so you can type and share your answer that way, share your thoughts that way, or you can raise your virtual hand and I can unmute you and you can share your thoughts that way.
And if I may, too, say, because we've done this workshop in a few other settings, if you're not sure, throw it out there. Like you're saying, could I do this? Could I do that? Ask it as a question, and that's really cool, too, because you may have ideas we never thought of. So even if you're not sure, put something out there, and we'll see what happens.
Well, and I think it's stuff that people may be interested in doing themselves, but also that they would like to see other people take up, right? So,
Yeah.
so you may not
Sure.
know a lot about the topic, but say, oh, do people write about this, or do people address this issue? And that might be something that the journal then could learn from and say, oh, well, that's kind of a question out there. We should see if we can get a practitioner to write about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, how about if we do this? Let's just, my next slide is just a space to actually brainstorm. So does somebody have a means of keeping track of time here?
I do. It's 11:30. It's about 11:30 or so.
Okay, well, maybe let's just take like 1 minute. And
Okay.
is that too little time,
No, I
or?
think it's people have started to type in, so I
Okay.
think people are starting to respond a little bit.
Okay.
One
So yeah, the
Kim.
prompt.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, the prompt that I put up here is just think of a story that you could tell about your teaching experiences, maybe with this population or other populations.
Okay.
And
But it can be that prompt or not. So that's
Yeah.
just one.
yeah.
So one of the ideas already coming in, Kim is already saying about the use of technology in prison education. I think that's an interesting topic, particularly when it comes to things
Absolutely.
like the internet, where accessibility is always an issue. There's a
Absolutely.
question from Ruth saying, would an article that covers best practices in implementing post-secondary education be considered in the practitioner or academic category? And that, I think, would be based on whether there was research conducted or whether
Yeah.
there would
Yeah.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to
And I
say a
could,
little bit about that?
yes, I would actually. So really good question. If you have any questions about it, feel free to email me. I think my email is up there, isn't it, Ginger, at the end?
It's at the last slide.
Yeah,
Want
because
me to bring that up really fast?
no, not really, but as long as it's going to be there. I think it's really sometimes we get papers that are in the middle. They're not quite they're not quite formal enough for the research side, but they're too ambitious in the sense of trying to go beyond sort of like a first-hand account to necessarily be contained in the practitioner side. And sometimes it's really hard to know, and we might sort of brainstorm like there's no one way to know how to make those calls, but we definitely have done that. And in some cases, we encourage folks to sort of write it more with the first-person perspective, and save some of the lit review stuff that you did for a different time. And other times, this maybe you should ratchet it up into a research paper. So it's a real good question. There's no hard answer, in the abstract. Clearly, the research papers are going to have like a higher test in terms of being grounded in some literature, or being grounded in some sort of ways of thinking about, theorizing about what you're talking about. That kind of grounding is not a requirement in the practitioner side.
Okay, here's another idea from Janet. Janet mentions possibly an article on correlations between arts workshops and more academic work in prisons, and that she's speaking to someone who's doing research into how arts education account for their work and how do they measure its value. She also works with university students who facilitate workshops for people inside. She's also thinking about the political ramifications of the work, dealing with racism, political power, the importance of discharge planning, and educating educators and communities about the strengths and needs of adults reentering communities. So the whole aspect, the whole political, social, political,
several papers.
Yes, and then
in general, the answer is hell yes.
Yes. Kim mentions the needs of special populations, learning differences, and post-release outcomes. There seems to be a lot of interest in post-release outcomes. Kim also mentioned, how we start thinking about post-release. And I know this is something that you think about, that you've talked about, Bill, that, planning for release and reentry should begin with day one of being inside, right? And it's not something that you wait for just before you're about to be released. And then Janet also mentions appropriate materials and approaches for people inside and co-occurrences of violence and trauma in learners' lives. And then how do these considerations frame prison education?
Could you read that again, Eric? I'm sorry.
I can't. It just disappeared. I think the question is dealing, and Janet, forgive me for paraphrasing here, but thinking about the overall role of violence in people's lives, and not only that they're experienced inside, but violence that they experienced prior to being incarcerated, and then thinking about materials that are going to deal with that. Yeah. Does that kind of capture what you were thinking there, Janet? You can kind of chime in if that wasn't correct, but so we're not just thinking generically about literacy is literacy, but we're thinking about authentic and relevant and appropriate materials for people who are incarcerated, and what does it mean to kind of really approach their life in a serious way.
I want to say I think all of these concepts that the participants have been sharing with us, they sound fantastic. I think we would love to have submissions on these topics. So for the practitioner side or the research side, whichever is more appropriate. But I definitely encourage those listening to get rolling with these and pursue them, because this is exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, Janet reiterates that. Well, yeah, what she was talking about was really understanding our learners' lives, right? So we know from adult education pedagogy more generally, we need to understand our learners' lives to make sure that the classes accommodate their strengths and needs, and violence and learning and the things that are connected to that with this population.
Yeah. So, I think these are, as Ginger said, I think these are all appropriate, and I think that just like on the surface, any of these could be developed as a research paper, or they could be developed as a sort of from a practitioner's perspective, like a personal sort of connection to a life experience that you've had, or that someone like a practitioner that you know of has had, and can write it up from that, because they're both so essential. And so if we're talking about understanding the learning, the lives, the day-to-day lives of prisoners, there's one, you can talk about that in a more abstract way, not to say that all the research papers are abstract. Clearly, we do ethnographic papers, but I'm just saying that, or you could have a very personal, first-hand experience that goes way beyond any kind of categories that we might think of that we can tidily fit people into. And the same thing with post-release, like the term post-release outcomes. When I hear that, it makes me think of a certain kind of empirical kind of research that's sort of quantitative, which is great. Like, we are very much open to sort of the bird's eye view of what's going on. We need that as well. And some countries, like Norway, are really into those kinds of broader sort of kind of studies. I don't know how that, I don't know how talking about post-release outcomes from a practitioner perspective would work, but I think it's doable. I just can't see it yet. I'm thinking of it more in that sort of quantitative way that's more of a, sort of a controlled or a sort of quasi-controlled study or some kind of correlation study, which tends to, in my mind, be more of like a research paper, but doesn't mean you can't do it. It's not suggesting itself yet to me. So.
Well, what I would recommend is, for those who are trying to decide which submission stream is best, the practitioner side or the research side, is maybe, since we now have an issue, read through the issue and take a look at the practitioner papers. I already, I showed just a few examples, of the practitioner papers, but I didn't really show any of the research papers. But just kind of scroll through the journal and see which feels like your natural fit as a writer. Maybe just sit down and start writing out your material if you haven't already started that, and see which one, which category you're more naturally inclined toward.
Yeah.
Because you might find that writing about something like the post-release experiences from a first-person point of view brings up ideas that writing from a more traditional research-based perspective, you wouldn't have discovered. So that's my advice.
Yeah. And then email us if you have questions. We'd love to sort of like brainstorm with you, and when it gets to real specific, like you have an outline or a couple sketches of ideas, we'd be so happy to sort of brainstorm. We really would.
Yeah, I love doing stuff like that. So anybody can send their ideas to me. I'll talk it out with you.
Kind of apropos of that, Cynthia Peters has just joined us. Cynthia, welcome. I'm going to unmute you in a second if that's okay with you. And for those of you that know, Cynthia is the editor of The Change Agent, and their upcoming issue is on prisons, I think. And so one of the things that I was thinking was that as you're going through the process, this journal is perfect for research articles. It's perfect for practitioner reflections. But as Bill and Ginger were saying earlier, writings by people, them sort of creative writing pieces by prisoners themselves, may not fit in the journal. But Cynthia, I'm wondering if there's going to be room for that sort of stuff in the next issue of The Change Agent.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The Change Agent is planning to publish a lot of pieces by prisoners and by people who've been released from prison, just because we like to kind of promote those voices as much as we can. And the issue is going to be focusing on prisons and mass incarceration and the question of justice and things like that. So, but I'm sorry I joined so late, but it's I wonder too if, like, out of the Change Agent, that we're going to be getting a lot of submissions, and I'm sure there's people whose pieces may, if they're appropriate for the Change Agent, that might be one thing, but then they could be maybe nurtured as writers for you, and it might be a different kind of a piece they would write for you. Yeah. But I could bridge them over to you. And another thing is we might get pieces that aren't quite right for us, but might be more right for you, and I could maybe send them your way or something like that. But there could be some collaboration here that would be really interesting.
Well, and I think that would be wonderful, Cynthia. This is Bill, and I don't know if you're here earlier, where we decided to draw the line with our journal, and I think it could be very, complementary. Your strategy might work really nicely. Is, for example, if prisoners are writing as their experience as a student, or just their day-to-day living firsthand experience and doing, say, creative writing or narrative writing of a different type, that's not really, we're not sort of set up for that, as much as we value that and think that's amazing. Right. However, if we have prisoners who are serving as tutors or as teachers, as many are, and they want to wear their practitioner hat and their prisoner hat, and sort of explore that. Uh-huh. That's amazing. So
Okay.
You know, or
Great.
if say they're doing some action research where they're actually doing some kind of some lit review and some kind of inquiry into an issue, that could even qualify on the research side. So
That's
yeah,
okay. Those are great ideas.
I
thank
really
you.
want to reiterate Cynthia's idea. I think it'd be really great if some of the people submitting to the change agent, like if they were identified as pieces that with further elaboration, could go in a journal like this. I think that would be great for them
Yeah,
to publish something in the change agent and then keep going with their writing and then publish it in another journal as well.
wonderful.
We have a piece in an earlier issue of the Change Agent by a young prisoner talking about what it's like being in adult ed classes in prison with older guys,
Yeah,
and how what that's like, the younger guys and the older guys, and how he ended up in a role of coaching the older guys, and sort of reflecting on how he was closer to his math skills, but they were able to sort of mentor him in other things in life. So it was kind of a cool thing.
that's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Okay. What can somebody give me a what time is it?
It's about 20 of, so.
Okay. Well, I guess if you guys don't mind, I'll go through the next few slides here
Okay.
because they do have some we think some important information for writers. The copyright issue we're using.
Ginger, I'm sorry. Before you do that, one last thing for Cynthia. Cynthia, offline, maybe we can connect and talk about like how we can come to this in your next issue and think about ways we can sort of approach this so we're tracking well as we move along.
Let's definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ginger. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we use Creative Commons guidelines, which really kind of mirrors the open access of the journal itself. If you submit to the journal and we accept your work and we publish it, the copyright remains with you, with the author. You can share it as much as you want if you have like the opportunity to include your work in an anthology or something like that. It belongs to you, so you've got it. It's basically a very flexible guideline that keeps a lot of control with the author. For kind of a sense of the process when you submit, you're going to follow the online system. So you'll be prompted to set up a user account and then submit your paper through that procedure. After you submit, you'll get some feedback from the editor, the practitioner editor, who is I think we actually have a practitioner editor, and then she has an assistant editor. The practitioner editor is Anne Costello, who is in Dublin, Ireland, and the assistant editor for practitioner papers is Cormac Behan, who is at the University of Sheffield in the UK. So they would, if you're submitting to the practitioner stream, you would receive feedback from one of them. If you are submitting to the research side, you get feedback from Dr. Muth, from Bill. And if it goes to peer review, then you would get feedback from 2 or 3 blind reviewers, and then go through the revision process. When your paper is accepted, then it will go into copy editing. We'll edit it up. We'll give you the opportunity to check the editing, see that everything is worded the way that you wanna word it, and then we'll move on to publication. You notice down here that we are looking for original work only. If there's something really special out there that we're looking to reprint, you would definitely need some permission from the original place of publication for that. But we are really looking for original work.
Yeah, and may I, Ginger, just jump in?
Yes.
So Yeah, so you're free to reprint or anthologize or use your material. You own it, you keep it. But we are looking for original work, and that, in fact, we had someone submit a paper that was written in Dutch and wanted to say, could I publish it with you guys in English? And unfortunately, the answer was no. Good try. But, it's still the original paper. You have to decide which journal you're going to submit it to. So, yeah, we're only accepting original work for our journal, but then the reprinting is yours. And Ginger, are you going to talk about how Volume 2 is going to work, or Issue 2 is going to work in terms of immediate publication and stuff?
Oh yes. As you'll see on the what we're going to do for the second issue is after an article is accepted, after it's been through the revision process and through the copy editing process, we're really going to try and take advantage of being an online journal and publish the article immediately. So as you can see on the website, we do have individual. We have the articles available individually, and then we also have them available together as a PDF. So for our next issue and for future issues, we want to take advantage of the online setting and publish the papers immediately individually, and then when we've collected an amount that can stand alone as an issue, then we'll publish the entire issue. So that gives you a good opportunity to get your stuff out there pretty quickly. You don't have to wait to go through the entire print publication process. I think we're about at our last slide here, which is our contact info. So if you are interested in contacting us, please by all means write down this info and definitely write down our website.
I'm going to be sending the PDF copy of the PowerPoint to everybody, so so they can also get the information that way.
Okay, cool. That's perfect.
Okay.
Any questions, comments, thoughts, anything that you want to run by us?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting opportunity, and I think the idea to be able to get in on the ground floor of a journal that's really kind of finding its voice, I think, is a nice opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, thoughts, questions that people had. You can either send it in via the question thing or raise your hand and I can unmute you. I think, we're trying to, as I can speak from my NJAL hat that I'm wearing, we're really trying to increase the amount of professional development that we do around correctional education because there's not a ton of opportunities. And so, things like this are really good. Ruth chimes in saying that this is a great idea in an area that needs more crossover and communication in the field. I agree.
Thank you.
And I agree with with Cynthia's earlier suggestion. I think that things like this are really an opportunity for writers to write for different audiences, right? And to kind of think about what the requirements are of different formats and different audiences, and for someone to take a piece that they started in one place and to further elaborate it, and vice versa, right? So there's things that maybe a researcher or practitioner wrote for the journal, but could be reformatted in a way that's appropriate for a venue like the Change Agent, right? And I think that's also an important way to think about it. So it's not just unidirectional, but we think about the needs of a variety of audiences and prioritizing their needs and getting the word out there in as many different ways as possible.
That's right. Yeah. Cynthia, when is that issue going to be coming out, the special issue?
Let me unmute Cynthia. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Okay, she's unmuted now. Yep.
Hi. The publication date is March 2015.
Okay.
We're going through our editorial process right now, and the due date for articles is November 3rd.
Okay.
Oh wow.
But I mean, we can, I can work with, if you get in touch with me and if we're kind of in communication, I mean, I can extend that. But
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
There's a question from Ruth saying, have you considered including corrections folks on the practitioner side.
Oh, absolutely. Do you mean
Yeah.
by corrections folks, do you mean like correctional officers and counselors?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. We really want this, folks who are like, on the ground working in any of these capacities. If they find us and they're writing about this, it says, that they must be searching for something or wanting to share something, and we absolutely would include them without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I would think also kind of in apropos of that, you would take articles that talk about informal or non-formal education as well, right? The variety of types of learning that can go on in these settings, even when it's not a formal curriculum.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Janet was talking earlier about like the interface with art and education, and so those are great examples of what happens in like, for example, when parents record storybooks and mail them home, or if they do artwork in prisons, collaborate on that. What's going on with that? There's some wonderful stuff about the experiences of art and its ability to sort of equalize the field and get everyone to to participate, build relationships, and all of that happens way outside of classrooms and outside of textbooks, and is hugely important. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Okay. Other. Okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ginger.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I'm really excited to see what comes down the road. With what kind of submissions we get, what kind of topics people are touching on. It's there's so much stuff out there, and so many different perspectives on education in this area. So.
And Cynthia, what I can do is I'll send an email out to all four of you or all three of you, so you can have each other's email addresses. Okay.
Yeah,
that'd be great. One thing I was going to mention is we had an editorial board meeting for our first issue of the Change Agent, and we had a teacher there who she brings our call for articles into her classroom in the prison, but she's had to really go up against whoever runs the prison, because they kind of the way she put it was, she doesn't want people to get this kind of recognition where they might get published in a magazine and have their picture in the magazine, and she literally actively doesn't want them to have that success.
Yeah.
And so she had to kind of fight her, her boss in a way to get the magazine into the prison and to get people writing for the prison. And then we also had a CO on our editorial board who talked about how like a big part of his training was, taught him to dehumanize people, and dehumanize the prisoners. And in the process, he felt like he dehumanized himself in a way. So just so many interesting things to unpack there. And then you're trying to do education in an environment where there's a lot of dehumanization going on.
Yes.
So that
in the first issue, Randall Wright's paper is all about sort of performative spaces and how identities are, defined. And like he uses a blog from a correctional officers. And in this case, it's not a very flattering example. The discourses are very dehumanizing, but he's not trying to put a circle around correctional officers, because he also talks about how prisoners create their own discourses that dehumanize staff, but these are really complex and very deep issues. And that experience you were just talking about, like the CO that was saying how he was dehumanized by those policies, that would be an amazing practitioner paper for our journal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are really important. So we would value that for sure.
Janet notes that this issue around, not encouraging or actively discouraging students from writing and getting published is a common problem, and that one of the ways, that if you can frame it as education, that you may get some traction rather than, framing it as a creative expression or, individual expression. But if it's framed as education, you may be able to get a little bit more traction.
Right.
there's always this paranoia that prisoners are going to be getting paid. God forbid that they should get paid, you know. And like in the federal system, it's illegal to have a job on the outside while you're on the inside. So if there's any perception that, like, you know, you're getting a huge royalty on this poem that you just wrote, you know, there's all those goofy attributes that come into it as well. But, you know, the other side of the weirdness of this is there's also the other side of, like, where reporters want to come in and sort of exploit prisoners, and they want to get these juicy stories out of them and go back and look good, like they've just done this great anthropological dig and look what I found. And so it's funny how tricky it all is, you know, whether to speak or not, and on whose behalf. Really, it's a very delicate dance all the time, you know, and you never get it right, you know. We're always sort of stumbling towards the light with it. Yeah. So.
All right, it's just about the top of the
any
hour.
Other questions?
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? I look forward to hearing from Ginger and Bill and Cynthia about work getting sent in various locations, and I think this is a great opportunity for dialogue to take place, and you all raised really important issues that I think can be picked up and really need to be addressed.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for this opportunity to get the word out, and everybody for joining us. And please do write to us, and we can brainstorm how to get your stuff into the journal. But thanks for listening and for participating. So.
Yeah, thanks everybody for sharing your ideas. Hope we see you in the other NGL webinars scheduled for this fall, and the NGL conference in the spring, April 24th, for those of you that live close enough to New Jersey to come to it. And possibly other, you know, sort of informal and semi-formal events that we're going to hold over the course of the year. So I'd like to thank Ginger and thank Bill for this presentation. I thought it was really, really informative. Good luck with the journal, and hopefully...
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem. And hopefully people will start contributing. And thanks everybody else for chiming in. And we'll see you all soon online. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.